Amy Celico, Albright's Stonebridge Group principal and head of the China practice. Prior to joining Albright Stonebridge, she was a senior director for China Affairs at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR. Thanks for joining us. Look, I think we just pick up on exactly the same point that Kayleigh was mentioning just a moment ago with Jenny. Expectations have been lowered really quite significantly by the U.S. side going into this meeting. What are your expectations?
Yeah, it's a great question. My expectations have been shaped by what we're hearing from the Biden team. And so, as Jenny just mentioned, the expectations have been set so low that we're not even anticipating the prospect of surprise coming out of this meeting. I think that, as Jenny was saying, the most important thing for the Biden administration is that they feel they're going into this meeting from a position of strength. Here domestically, passed the COVID recovery bill, a lot of vaccinations happening, have met with partners and allies in Europe, and of course, the Indo-Pacific have re-entered international organizations and institutions. And then finally, on China, they've taken very, very strong action on national security, on technology, on human rights issues, and some on trade. And so from the US side, this meeting is about just speaking plainly and clearly to the Chinese government and saying, what you're hearing from us in public are our priorities, and that is what we want to focus on in private. From Beijing's perspective, I'm interested to see how they're shifting their calculus really in the moments going into this meeting.
Right.
Because Xi Jinping a week ago felt like he was coming into this meeting from a position of strength. We've heard he himself say the East is rising, the West is falling. And yet, clearly, these top two diplomats who are flying from Beijing to Anchorage for this meeting, they wanted, as Jenny said at the beginning of her piece, to get out of this meeting specific process, the process that a strategic dialogue would restart, the process that we're going to set a meeting between the two leaders for next month. I don't think the Chinese are going to get that. I also don't think the US is going to get much out of it, but they didn't expect to.
Okay, so even if we don't get anything out of this meeting, when these conversations are happening about policy priorities, where do you see areas that they can actually align?
I don't think this meeting is about finding those. Honestly, Secretary Blinken is coming from Seoul. And so one area that he talked a lot about was North Korea. That is clearly an area where there could be alignment between the United States, Beijing, and of course, our allies in the region. And so let's hope that that is a major part of the conversation. I do think this meeting is about the United States making its intentions clear and saying, we are going to be talking about issues and interests that reflect American values. And we're seeing that in really recommitted statements about standing up for human rights and standing up against Chinese behavior that's undermining the global system, including its relationships with other countries. And so, just to get back to your question, while I would hope there is also conversation about climate cooperation, of course, about COVID recovery globally, financially, as well as the pandemic itself in public health and non-proliferation. I do think we're constrained in this first meeting to be focused on those issues.
Amy, I'm standing here in London. You talked about allies in the region. What about allies across the Atlantic? Europe seems to be taking a much more mercantile approach to China. And I'm wondering really whether or not the US can get Europe and the United States on the same page when it comes to China. How realistic a prospect do you think that is? And how important is that going to be in this setup into this meeting?
Well, as you well know, Jake Sullivan made a point of giving advanced talking points to his European counterparts in advance of this meeting in Anchorage, because he really does want our European allies and partners to feel bought into what the United States is trying to achieve. I do agree with you, Guy. We have some misalignment of interests But I want to, I work at Albright Stonebridge Group. Our clients continue to want to be operating in the China market, whether they're American or European. So I do want to remind our viewers that, yes, we do have some shared interests in getting some real progress on longstanding thorny issues in the trade relationship. But back to the Europeans, I was interested to read overnight that the European Union is likely to sanction government officials over Hong Kong. And so, of course, you sitting in London, you know that that is a key issue for the British government as well. And so we do have some overlapping interests, even in these thorny issues. And that is going to cause concern in Beijing, who felt that, this European-China agreement on investment was going to be the framework for the relationship going forward. I think the Europeans and many stakeholders across Europe are saying, hold on, we've also got some areas where we don't see alignment and we're not coordinated. We do see China acting outside of international norms that we're comfortable with. And so how the United States and the Europeans come together on where those issues are and how to maybe work together to enhance leverage of China, those are the issues that still have to be resolved.